Tuning you in now to the LBX Show with your host, Brandon Wiley. Brought to you by the LBX Collective, your community to connect, engage, and inspire.
All right. Well, welcome everybody to the LBX Show for May 17th, 2026. I'm your host, Brandon Wiley, and we have a special edition show lined up for you today with full coverage from Adam Pratt on the AAA Expo in Guangzhou from May 10th to the 12th. The AAA Expo, for those of you who don't know, is the Asia Amusement and Attractions Expo. And so we had Kevin Williams there. He took some pictures. We had a bunch of other people there as well taking pictures. And Adam Pratt is going to walk us through all of that. But, for the agenda for the show, first, we're going to dive right into a brief news you should know, and then right into a road trip, actually, to check out some pics from my most recent visit this last week to the Factory, which is Canada's largest indoor adventure park. And then Chuck DeMonte is back with promo pro tips. And this week, he discusses tips on how to effectively increase group bookings. After that, Adam Pratt with Arcade Corner does an extended deep dive, as I mentioned, on all the releases and updates out of the AAA Expo. So, given that, let's get started with some news you should know. All right. So as we like to start our latest news you should know with the Intercard lineup 2026. This is where you can meet with all of the experts behind Intercard. They're familiar not only obviously with the Intercard products, but also just the industry in general. So you have questions about cashless, you have questions about amusements or redemption. These guys have been in the industry for a long time, and the team that they've brought and that they bring to these different events are very knowledgeable and skilled as well. And so speaking of the events that they're coming up to this next week, they are going to be at the BCAO Bowling Centers Association of Ohio. So that is the BCAO. Small little meetup that is May 18th to the 20th. And then you have MoMA, which is the Minnesota Operator Show. And that is June 2nd to 4th. Then you have the IAAPA Asia Expo. Yes, we're going to be talking about the AAA Expo today, but this is the IAAPA's version of that expo, much broader. Obviously, the amusement and attractions was focused more on immersive and amusements, where the IAAPA show is much more broad, has everything from coasters to water parks, etc. So that is June 9th to the 12th in Hong Kong this year. And then Bull Expo, which I will be at. I know Kevin Williams will be there. Adam Pratt will likely be there as well. And this is June 28th through July 2nd in Nashville, Tennessee. This is at the Gaylord Opryland Resort. And that is a beautiful, phenomenal resort if you've never been there. The Bull Expo was there, gosh, I want to say back in 2017. It was the last time I actually was at that facility, but it's a gorgeous, beautiful resort and venue, and should be a great expo as well. So that is the Intercard lineup. That is it for news you should know. It's really short because we've got a really robust, long overview of the AAA Expo with Adam Pratt. I want to make sure we get into some good amount of time there. And then also we've got my road trip to the Factory in London, Ontario in Canada, the world's largest indoor adventure park. And so we're going to get right into that coming up next. All right. Well, let's talk a little bit about this thing. This place is absolutely massive. So the first picture we're going to take a look at, and I will make this just a little bit larger here so that you can see the pictures. But basically, what we've got going on here is this. The Factory occupies about 200,000 square feet within a 1 million square foot building. That was the old Kellogg's factory. So that's why I decided to start with this picture here, because there's a picture of Tony the Tiger and Frosted Flakes. They're great. And we have some homages to the Kellogg's brand throughout the facility. But this the facility is absolutely amazing. There's a Hard Rock Cafe on premise, a bunch of other restaurants. There's a children's museum, an art museum, as well as then again the 200,000 square foot factory. And this is a giant indoor adventure park, but there's also some other stuff we'll talk about and we'll take a look at as well. So that was the back check-in part of the factory. So there's technically three different ways you can come in, but really two. This is the primary entrance here. You can see it goes down a long hallway when you first walk in the door. There's a party check-in, which I really liked. They just do some enormous volume here. So they see sometimes on Saturdays upwards of 1,500 guests coming in at a given time. So this is not like total for the day. This is like 1,500 guests running around doing shit in the factory at a time. And so they've got a separate party check-in thing. They just handle parties totally separate. And then their check-in counter, as you can see, is really meant to handle volume. There's 7 different roller point of sale terminals here. And, you can sign your waiver by QR code, obviously, but they're really, again, focused on driving enormous volume through this front check-in. They do a bunch of groups. They do a bunch of camps and field trips and everything else in this space as well. This is what they call the hero zone. So this is the center image. This space is absolutely massive. This pictures really just don't do it justice, unfortunately. But you can see actually in the top right corner, if you can look up in the top right corner of this, that is a gantry crane thing that basically moves across the whole space and lowers down and up. They don't use it on a regular basis. In fact, they don't run it when there's any guests in the facility. But they do use it on occasion to do maintenance with the lights, for example, because that is a 100-foot ceiling. So from floor to the top of the ceiling, it's about 100 feet. It is absolutely massive and cavernous inside. When they are open, they have a giant projector projecting different videos and things on that concrete wall in the back. And they have trampolines, they have big airbags, they've got a ninja course, they've got 2 towers for their ropes courses, which are a lot of custom work has been done, which we'll take a look at here in just a minute on the other one. And then they have zip lines connecting between the two. So there's actually only one entrance and exit, and that's on this second side. All the guests come into the ropes course on this side that we're taking a look at here. And then they go up and they can zip line across to the other tower, traverse a couple of the stories, the different levels, and then zip line across again back to the main tower. And do that. There are 5 stories to each of these ropes courses. And again, just freaking phenomenal. They have giant New Year's parties here. So they take that gantry, run it across, hang big balloon drops, and they have massive balloon drops that just drop down into, over this whole thing. There's like a big New Year's Eve party that they do, which is pretty cool as well. You can see here, from this angle, this is not open to guests, this angle here that I was on, but you can see some of the custom work. So the factory and letters, that's actually part of one of the routes that you're taking. So you're like climbing across letters that are that have the factory written and branded on it. There's a couple of things down below. You can see the little factory cutouts as well. That's part of their logo. That is also part of their custom work. And there's a bunch of other attractions and routes that they really had a hand in customizing with the group that built these out for them. So this is the Hero Zone. This is their main, I would say, active play element. They do have a smaller toddler zone and like small child zone, like 7 and under, with some soft play and some other interactives and manipulatives with, and then obviously lots of places for parents to sit and hang out. And then they have this whole separate floor that they call the clubhouse. And I was deeply impressed with the clubhouse. I was impressed in general with the way that everything was laid out, the way that it was run, the utilization of space, the attraction mix that they had here. But this clubhouse area was very well done. Really felt like a wilderness type lodge like a lodge, basically. Their mini golf course that they had was very well maintained, very well themed, again, with that kind of like outdoor woodsy lodge. It felt a little bit like a more robust, larger version of the type of mini golf course that you find at a Great Wolf Lodge, typically underneath their ropes course. So usually they have a small 9-hole course under a ropes course at most Great Wolf Lodges. The theming felt a little bit like a Great Wolf Lodge, which, works, I think, for them, given their location up in Ontario. And, this doesn't really do justice to the space, but again, very well done with some of the theming. And then this is like their bar area. They have it's a full restaurant and bar. A lot of people will come actually just for the restaurant, for the bar side. They actually won't even go downstairs to the adventure park area. This is a big popular destination for, again, mini golf, bar, and food. They have some amusement up on this level, but most of it is, your more classic old school bar amusement. They have a big buck hunters and some skee ball and that kind of stuff. But then they do have a number of multi-sport sims. So the multi-sport sims you can rent by the hour or by the half an hour, and you can play, again, all different types of sports. And these golf is the most popular, is what they've said, as well. And then you also have some duck pin bowling. I think I want to say there were 8 lanes of duck pin, which, again, they've laid everything out. They separated it. You can see the antlers, everything is really on theme, on brand up in this clubhouse. This is obviously not the way the rest of the space is themed. This is just up in the clubhouse area. There's a couple more of their golf sims. They do have a separate karaoke room. So this was the only one that they had there, but obviously, it's good. They had the space. They just dropped in a separate standalone karaoke room. That's one of the things I appreciated about these guys. They utilize a lot of the empty space to experiment with things. And if things work really well, then they continue on. And if they don't, well, then they don't. And this is a little bit of an overflow seating area, but again, they really focused on theming each of their areas in a unique way to give it a bit of a different flair. This could have just been a big open space, but yet they decided to make take an artistic approach to it and make it a little bit like a shipwreck in there. This is getting into their amusement and arcade area. So there's like a little, I'll call it buildings / thing to play around in for the smaller kids again. And then they had some more light walkaway F&B, which apparently I didn't get a good picture of here. But basically different single kitchen in the back, interconnected kitchen, but they had just different bays that you could go and get your tacos and get some pizza and get some ice cream. But again, separate bays, and all operated by the factory as well. Good number of amusement pieces and redemption. They had a full redemption counter. They didn't have a redemption store. They actually took a container and set a container inside and then cut out a hole in the container. And then that's their redemption counter. Very well stocked, very well laid out. I thought this was really interesting. They took an old school shuffleboard table, and instead of doing some of the modifications to shuffleboard, it puts the bar on the edges of the shuffleboard. They actually built a metal frame that goes under and around it, and then put a piece of plexiglass over the top, so you can still play your shuffleboard, but at the same time you can have full food and drinks while you're playing that shuffleboard. So a different approach to take what was probably basically some simple shuffleboard tables to make them more competitive socializing aspect without going and investing in the augmented shuffleboard tables that we talk about a lot on the show and on Sound Off. Then, like I mentioned, this is one of the areas where they had some underutilized space. This was a former vendor who was in there doing some escape rooms, and their lease ran out and they decided to move to a new location. And so they had this empty space and well, what can we do in this space? Well, let's clear it out and let's do a slime lab. We'll just do a pop-up slime lab. Kids come in, they make slime because they run a bunch of camps already. And so they're well, why don't we just include making slime as part of the camp? And so they did that, and it's been so successful. They're actually thinking about making the slime lab a permanent attraction and building it in a little bit more. It still has kind of a pop-up-y feel to it. They're going to make it into a more permanent attraction because it has been so successful. So, that is probably just a quick rundown of the factory. I know that it's great to sometimes see what other people are doing. These guys are running a great operation. I had a chance to walk around with their GM and a couple of their people on operations and IT, as well as the 2 owners walked around as well. So it really was a great time visiting them, and I really appreciate their hospitality and look forward to, hopefully being able to visit them again in the near future. All right. That was Road Trip. Coming up after the break, we've got promo pro tips with Chuck DeMonte. Intercard is the only cashless system designed, developed, and manufactured all under one roof. They introduced cashless technology to the amusement industry and have been leading the way for over 30 years. Cashless systems from Intercard increase customer spending, guest satisfaction, and boost revenues by up to 30%. Intercard is so proud to be serving the amusement industry, and if you aren't already part of their global family of customers, they hope you will become one soon.
Hello and welcome to Promo Pro Tips with Chuck DeMonte. That is me. And today I want to go over something that's, not new to the FEC industry, not new to operators, but it's something that's been coming up a lot lately. And I always try and pick topics that have just seemed to be in my sort of ethos, right? What people are talking about lately. And I think, a lot of people are trying to increase lately a lot of group and event bookings, corporate bookings, group bookings, school bookings, field trips, right? Whatever that means to them. And I just get the sense that people, think it's an easier accomplished thing than it is. And I say that because it is very well worth pursuing, right? But if you're going to do it with intention, and I think you do it correctly. Otherwise, you're not going to get the proper results. And it's another thing to say, oh, that doesn't work, right? People just, as a general sort of approach to things, that people try something, it doesn't work the first time, and then they just say, oh, that promo, that sale, that strategy didn't work, right? So getting group and event sales could be huge for your business, right? But you need to do it properly, and you need to do it with intention, okay? There's entire businesses, companies, industries built on sales, how to do sales, the systems that you use, right? And you need to take a chapter, right? Not even a page. You need to take a full chapter out of that book, right? And so I want to give you the few core pieces that you really need to drive the results for group and event bookings, okay? First and foremost, you need systems, okay? You need a CRM. That's the biggest, going to be the core pillar. That's the customer relationship management software, okay? This is how you keep track of your leads. This is where your data, your contacts, your leads will flow into, okay? This is where you're going to make notes on them. This is where they're going to have their contact information. This is where you're going to say, hey, this is a lead, follow up with them, create tasks. It's your organization is the cornerstone of any sales system that you are trying to build, use, or do. Otherwise, your sales will fall through the cracks. It's hard to keep track, right? It's hard to create systems to continue to follow up with people in a meaningful, proper way. So first and foremost, you need a CRM. Right. Also, it's like, how are you going to call? Say, we'll discuss one of the things, little, spoiler alert. You're going to need a salesperson, right? We'll discuss that too. But are they calling from their cell phone when they call people? They probably shouldn't be, right? So it's like, what if somebody has an incoming call? What if they leave your company, right? So you should have a system that they're calling out of, okay? So that could be the CRM, right? It's sending emails out of it, right? That could be the CRM. So the CRM is super important. So you need your system, CRM being one of them. How are you going to email them? How are you going to call them? Are you recording those calls, right? All of those systems, right? Now, there's probably a bunch that maybe I don't even know about, right? But take time to do your research. Nowadays, Google, you say Google is your friend, AI is your friend. Go in Claude, go in ChatGPT. Say, I'm setting up a sales system to, increase my group and event bookings for my FEC. What are some of the systems I need, right? And then start, putting together those systems, okay? So now that you have the systems, you will need the data, AKA the contacts. Who are you going to be reaching out to, right? That is the oil that's going to go in that system, that machine, okay? So one of the tools we use is called Apollo. It's great. I think you can get it for fairly cheap, but it's a huge database of people, right? And you can go in and add filters, say, give me people in this zip code, companies or schools or, owners, whatever, that make this much money and have this much business, and this is their job title. Give me their emails, give me their phone numbers, right? That is a great way to contact them. Where they work, where's the place of business. Now, again, spoiler, salesperson can use that information to call, to go visit, to drop things off, right? Know who they're looking for when they walk into the location, okay? So you need contacts. You have the systems, now you need the oil, you need contacts, right? Third, you need an offer, right? What is that offer going to be? It's, we created this cool training, corporate training where it's like team building, right? Or we, hey, come in, offer the C-level, executives to come in for a free tour, right? Completely free on the house, 5, 10 of them, whatever. And, so they can see what it's like to be in your location and the food you have and the experience and all that other stuff, right? It's a way to build that relationship with them. With schools, offer free tickets to them, right? For their students to come use it as rewards, their students to come and check it out, right? So what is the offer? So you need the system to keep track of them. You need the people you're going to contact, and you need something you're going to tell them, put in front of them, right? And don't try and be so salesy right away, right? What can you give them? How can you be of value to them, right? And then last but not least, you need a salesperson to do all of this, okay? And it shouldn't be a secondary job for them. Now, maybe they could do 50-50, right? But it's hard for a GM to do this properly. It's hard for, your social media marketing person to do this properly, right? Sales is a specific skill set, and these tasks need to be done properly over and over and over and over again, okay? So those are the 4 pieces. Systems, you need the contacts, You need the proper offer, and you need a salesperson to work those systems, contacts, and offer. Okay, so get out there. If you want to do group events, do it properly. And I promise you, if you take your time to do it properly, it will be lucrative.
If you run a location-based entertainment brand and want to attract more visitors, check out Radius. They use real-time location data and customized marketing strategies to help brands like yours stand out. Radius can boost your foot traffic and build a loyal customer base. Plus, they're offering a complimentary local market analysis to show you exactly how they can help you grow. Curious? Visit radius.co and ask about your free market analysis. That's RAYDIUS.co.
Everybody, this is Adam with Arcade Heroes for the LBX Collective. Welcome to Arcade Corner. Let's get into what the real big news was this week, which was the AAA Expo 2026 held in China. I think Guangzhou, but I'm not 100% sure. Never been to China. I just heard a lot of the names, and I was not able to be there, but Kevin Williams, he was. I actually did not get all the photos we're going to be looking at today from Kevin. Instead, got it from other sources. And in fact, there are even more photos that I'm still waiting on, including some videos that I just haven't received as of the time when I'm recording this. But either way, there's a lot of arcade news to come out of China this week. And so that's what I'm going to go through here. Going to take a little bit longer for the arcade corner than we normally do, just because there's so much to go through. In fact, Wallop, who's a sponsor on my Arcade Hero site, they sent almost 700 photos, which I didn't go through all those. I did my own live stream going through those, but like doing that on the website's just not tenable to do, and that's only one company. And of course, there's a lot of repeats. But what I've done is all the photos that I have gotten, I've alphabetized them by the name of the company and then what it is there. And so just using your normal Windows slideshow software to go through that. And as you can see here, first off, we have Ace Amusement, which I wish they would have put an S at the end there. I always want to say amusements. But either way, this is a company that has really been growing the past few years. And I've talked to some here in the West that are not very happy with them. They're not pirating games, but you could say that they are really leaning heavily into borrowing certain concepts. And so it's riding that line, and they're doing things in a way that are creating very similar games, as we'll see, as to what certain Western studios are producing here. But they're producing a lot of stuff, and they're doing some original things as well, such as their hovercraft racing game, which they showed off last year. And now I guess one thing that I should throw out before we get too far into this is, given that these are all Chinese-based companies, some of them do have official distribution and representation here in North America as well as Europe, but not all of them do. And who the representative is, it varies. So like in Europe, as one example, Ace Amusement, they are generally their products are carried by UDC, a distributor out of the UK. But I think I've also seen some others across Europe that also carry their products. Whereas in North America, it can be a combination of either Coastal Amusements or Amusement Source International. I think there might have been one other company that's carried their stuff as well. And then that also applies to all the other companies that we're going to discuss today. Like even the major ones like Wallop will oftentimes have more than one company that they work with on a particular game. The only one that I can think of that's an exception to that would be Unis, as they already have their North American as well as South American and European representatives, or sorry, their divisions. I guess for Unis, they don't necessarily have a Unis Europe, and so they'll use, I think it's LAI Games, I can't remember, or I can't. It might be, there's Instance Automatics, that's the one that I'm thinking of that I believe carries Unis. But if I'm incorrect about any of those, my apologies. Just going off top of my head here, and that's not that's often not perfect. But but yeah, Unis North America, they handle all their stuff directly, and so they don't need to worry about working through a middleman, third party sort of thing, as most Chinese companies do. So anyways, that out of the way, let's take a look here. So as you can see on the right hand side, one of the things that's different for Ace Amusement at this show, as shown by this product on the left hand side, is one that's we're not super familiar with here in the States. It's called Ultraman. It's a big Japanese IP, and we've seen people try to bring Ultraman stuff over here to the States. There's an Ultraman pinball machine by Spooky Pinball. There was also, I think they were called Attractions and More, who debuted at Amusement Expo 2025 with a boxing machine, as well as a couple of Ultraman machines. But from the stuff I've been seeing from them, I mean, they weren't at Amusement Expo 2026. They weren't at IAPA, as I recall, at 2025. And they've just been pushing the Boxer. They haven't really been pushing the Ultraman stuff, which again doesn't surprise me much. I was speaking with Saki at Raw Thrills, who's from Japan, and when I told her that they had the Ultraman games, she's like, "Does anybody know what Ultraman is?" At least over here in the West, and I'm pretty sure that gut feeling of hers was correct, that it's just not a big thing. But we'll get it. Well, we have another photo of that a little later. And so here's another angle from their booth that also shows the Ultraman game. As you can see, the crowd's pretty big. I guess that's another thing, too, to throw out here, is that one thing that I think we miss out on a lot is, and this is just due to how news is able to leave China, which is oftentimes not accurate and not very detailed, is that there are a lot of arcade venues in China. So one game that we're going to talk about a little bit later, Asphalt 9 Legends Arcade, which was carried here in the States by LAI Games back in 2021, that worldwide has sold over 10,000 units. Now, you might be wondering, how is that possible? I haven't seen that game at every FEC out there, like I say Jurassic Park or Cruise and Blast. Well, most of those sales were in China. And Eunice recently posted on LinkedIn about a game that would be considered obscure here, but over there, they've already sold over 3,000 units alone for this game. And so I don't know exactly how many venues exist in China, but it's to the tune of thousands. And so that's one other reason why you're also seeing more Western companies looking to break into the Chinese market, like Raw Thrills and Play Mechanics, as we'll see when we get to Wallop, because there is pretty good demand, pretty strong market there. The only thing that may kind of tick you off if you're an operator like me is on Discord that I run about arcades, there is a Chinese player there, a user. I'm not sure if I don't think he's an operator the way he talks, but he was sharing prices, and like prices for games that we see here versus there. It's like Godzilla Kaiju Wars and some other games, like the price is significantly lower. Like if you were to translate the currency from their RMB, I think they call it in China. I think it's the Chinese yuan, but they the designations like RMB or something, and to USD, and it was just like a bunch of games that here are over $20,000 were under $10,000 over there. It's just like, oh, really? And like even importing, it's not all on tariffs. Tariffs don't add that much to the price comparatively. Like from what I've seen on a lot of products, that they're not adding $10,000 on top of products, and so yeah. Anyway, but when you're seeing big crowds out there, that's because there is a big market for it. All right, here's a brand new game from Ace Amusement called Cold Trigger. And so it's pretty common with the naming conventions that they seem to really lean into with Chinese games, just using 2 words as opposed to a single word or 3 words or whatever. It's usually 2. And so in this one, it's Cold Trigger. Now, this seems to be their interpretation of there's a game we'll cover later, which is already available here in the States called Phantom Vanguard, released through Wallop and LAI Games. And that introduced a very unique idea with gun games where it could be a hybrid mounted gun game as well as a free gun game or tethered gun game. And so that's what Ace is doing here. But what they've changed about it is that when your gun is in the mounted holster, there's a little screen on there, which seems to work maybe kind of like a scope. I know this is a little bit hard to read here. Let's see if we can zoom in. And so, yeah, that's a little bit better. Take down incoming threats. Eliminate special enemies to upgrade your weapons. Use the side button on the gun to throw grenades or other projectiles to attack enemies. Insert the gun into the mount. Actually, the translation here is pretty solid. Oftentimes, there are some Chinese companies, the translation's not good. So, and then insert the gun into the mount, control the secondary screen, and activate the tactical view. Perform long-range sniping or deploy your drones for air support. And so that's what that particular screen does, and you can kind of see it a little bit better there. So that's the tactical view when the gun is inside the mount. And so that's cool. Although from an operator perspective, yeah, what's the first thing you think of is maintenance. What's going to happen if a kid smashes or a teenager smashes the screen with the gun or something like that? And so, yeah, that would not be good. But I still appreciate anything that's a little bit different along those lines. And let's see. Hey, here's a game that I mentioned earlier called Hover Rush. I was really surprised that we did not see this at IAPA 2025. And as far as I've heard, there aren't any of the companies that I mentioned that generally works with Ace Amusement to carry this over here yet. And so at IAPA, they had like Racing Extreme and Bikers Madness for racing machines that were these twin models that had the two screens stacked on it. Now, what's different about this one is that it's a hovercraft racing game. And so as far as I'm aware, and I've done a lot of research into arcade history, that you don't have any other hovercraft racing games that have ever been designed. So I'm interested to try out this one and see how it goes. And then some of those other racers you can sort of see in the background here. If we zoom in, there we go. Yeah, they have both Chinese and English. There's Racing Extreme, Bikers Madness right there, then some other games. So let's zoom back out and on to the next one. Here's a new one called Shooting Carnival, which uses a bezel to separate one single screen into 10 different screens where you have one on the top and then these 9 segmented ones down below. Not sure if this is supposed to be kind of like a point blank game, like the old Namco Point Blank, or something else. I also assume this would work with tickets. Now here's another one where they are obviously inspired by Top Gun Maverick. Now, I guess to be fair, Ace does have a couple of other flight combat simulators in arcades. One that was released here through LAI Games that's been pretty popular is called Airstrike, and it uses a swivel seat for a motion base, and as well as these yoke style controls. And so it looks like that they've repurposed those, slightly redesigned them for this new Thunderjet game. But that they're using what's become the new trend in displays is using portrait style, but with an 85 or 86 inch display. It's so big and it becomes wide enough that it's better than your older attempts at using portrait screens. Like one that might come to mind is Tank 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 by Bandai Namco that came out in 2009 or so. And that was a small 32-inch screen. And so it's like human vision is normally panoramic, and that's why 16:9 screens were always great, because they better fit with our peripheral view. But yeah, 32-inch screens in portrait mode or 42-inch screens in portrait mode just were never really good because of that. But in these 85, 86 inchers, it actually isn't so bad, and at least from what I've played, it actually felt a little bit immersive, and I preferred this style over stacking two 65-inch screens on it, just because that seam between the screens drives me crazy because it's always forcing my view to just focus on the bottom screen, and then it's just like, this feels so pointless to have the top screen because it doesn't feel immersive. But when you have a screen like this, there's no seam to point your view anywhere, so it almost gets like this pseudo VR headset sort of effect going on, but without something pressing on your face or that you're having to manage or going out of focus all the time. And so, yeah, from what I've seen on this one, again, it's sort of going towards the direction of Top Gun Maverick more than it was doing Airstrike. However, it does have a first-person mode. Just the odd thing about it is that in the gameplay from the video that they put onto YouTube is that it keeps doing things like they're mixing fighter jets from completely different eras. Like I think you have like Wildcats from World War II being attacked by F-22s and stuff, and so it's just like, I don't think that would be happening unless there's maybe some sort of sci-fi explanation that they have there. But even in this photo, you can see they're obviously having combat in some modern setting, because like there's a modern windmill right there, but also fighting inside of caves and such. So And then here's a closer view at the Ultraman games. Now, this is different from the Ultraman games that I had mentioned that had been shown through attractions and more, as those were very specifically redemption games, and one used a water gun, another one used these sliding balls that were attached to the cabinet, whereas this one is using tethered pistol guns instead. And so it looks like a light gun sort of game, just that the control panel itself is a little bit low. Also looks like there are displays on the control panel, as you can see here. It's just not clear if those are actually displays or if it's just maybe backlit artwork, or what that it would be for if they were displays and such. But yeah. Here's one that I guess this is out of order. And so this will be back when we're talking about Wall Up, but it is one of the bigger releases at the show. In fact, there's two of them there, and so I'll get back to that later. And so then we got Bandai Namco was at the show. Now, they didn't bring a whole lot of stuff, but they did have this interesting Pokemon Pokeball game where you can win cards. If you know anything about Pokemon cards, you know that's huge business. Now, these are not the Pokemon cards that you generally think of when it comes to the tabletop game, but these would be other collectible cards from Pokemon. But this is a ball toss game, and the balls themselves look like the Pokeballs from the cartoons. I like that there's a sign on there, please do not take the ball away. Please don't steal. I know some operators are like, yeah, that just tells them to steal. But as you can see there are 24 different cards to collect. You throw the balls at the screen, play whatever game it is. And as it says at the top there, you can catch 100 more Pokemon, and the legendary Pokemon will, or catch 100 more Pokemon and the legendary Pokemon will appear. Translation on that's a little weird. And so no idea though if this one, even though it's being carried by Bandai Namco, if it will show up over here in the West. I do think it would be a great one to have, especially where ball toss is becoming such a big thing, as we talked about with the Stranger Things arcade a few weeks ago. But yeah, no idea, just because the Pokemon license does make things a little more complicated than some other IP. For something that isn't IP, you have Crabzilla Strikes. This is over at the Baohui booth. And so Baohui, they've worked with Sega a few times in carrying some of their games like Hypercross, the snowmobile racing game, as well as some other titles. This looks like a coin pusher. So I wouldn't be surprised with coin pushers, since they're still so popular. They keep being imported over here, but they'll be rebranded a lot of the time. If this wouldn't be rebranded with something, not that I can think of any sort of crab enemy that would be a good IP to attach to. But here's another thing that, so in North America, this game right here, Speed Rider 4DX, is being carried by Bandai Namco Amusements, whereas in Europe it's carried by Sega Amusements. But the Chinese manufacturer is Baohui, and then the Taiwanese developer who created the software is IGS. So there's all these little hands, all these cooks in the kitchen, so to speak. But that is who sells it also into China. And then there's also this Baohui Wonderland redemption game that has mounted guns made for kids, but not 100% sure what all that is there, or what the gameplay is like. It looks like one of your typical Chinese multiplayer games, although it has players standing on stuff. Maybe you're trying to shoot them down, knock them off. Don't know, without seeing it in action. Now to another manufacturer, you got Flamestone, and Flamestone, this one's somewhat confusing because there's another company there called Leon Amusement, and a lot of times their designs look very similar to each other. And I thought that they had been copying each other, but it just turns out that they're really good friends, and the owners know each other, and that they're friends. I can't remember if there's a familiar relation or anything, but Flamestone and Leon both see a lot of their games brought here into the States through Jet Games USA. Although I think Flamestone brings more in through them than Leon does. But it's still, again, it becomes a little bit confusing because sometimes they'll even share the same booth. So like at IAPA 2025, they were sharing the same booth. But also Flamestone likes to put their name on stuff. But I guess this one is kind of a wink towards their relationship with Jet Games, because they have that. But this is also a Top Gun Maverick sort of game that they're coming along with, which also has the portrait style. But this isn't a twin model cabinet, so you do have the two player stations coming with it. The controls do look like a yoke control that looks like a motion base, but it also looks like first person shooting as opposed to third person seeing your jet craft from behind like in Top Gun Maverick. I don't remember Top Gun having a first person mode, but here's a slightly better look at that yoke controller. And actually this is a possible, I don't know. Now I'm wondering if this is the same. Maybe it's just a deluxe version just due to the size difference. Not 100% sure. I mean, the gameplay also looks slightly different, but it's hard to tell with a still. Shooting Carnival, another game that is using that sort of terminology. But different from what Ace is doing exactly. Now, Flamestone, one of their big things that they innovated on was making those metal guns machined out of aluminum and having a lot more heft to them and feeling a lot more realistic than your typical plastic arcade gun, as well as using force feedback recoil through air compression. And so this looks like a shooting gallery style game with a little bit of carnival maybe thrown in there. I did see a preview video of this. It was really strange, but it was sort of hitting on those carnival vibes. Not quite, not leaning into it all the way. Maybe it was all unintentional where they were trying to do creepy clowns and they have no idea what carnival is and whatnot. But yeah, I guess trying to do that. Although now that I look at this photo a little better, this actually is not a video game. This is a electromechanical game. So, okay. Yeah. So they're the ones that did the On Target, which Sega is carrying in both Europe and North America. And so, I mean, I think this themed version might be a little bit better than On Target is, just because people relate to, circus and shooting clowns and stuff more so than they would just random various targets. Also at Flamestone was Treasure Hunt Adventure. Sometimes it's a little hard to know what the games are called specifically because they may have several different names on the same cabinet. And so, hard to say what that is exactly, but this appears to be maybe a 4-player game, as those look like bench seats that could fit another person on them. Also motion base, but otherwise probably leaning into the Dead Storm Pirates style gameplay, or Gold Storm Pirates being the more recent one. And then also there's not a whole lot of VR anymore to be found at these Chinese trade shows. And just a few years ago and several years ago, they were dominating all sorts of booths. But if the VR market collapsed over in China, then you're not going to get quite as many games. But now I guess maybe collapse is maybe too harsh a word. Now, obviously, if they're making something like this, and there are a couple of others that are available, as we'll see, then there is still demand, but certainly the demand has trailed off a lot from where it had been. And if it trailed off in China, then I guess that's also an indicator of how it's doing everywhere else. But wasn't able to get really good footage or photos of this one particularly, and there wasn't any English translation, which sometimes, not always, but sometimes indicates that they aren't really planning on bringing this over to the West unless there just happens to be a lot of demand for it. But it does handle up to 4 players. It is a little bit more like the global VR style VR headsets, with the whole gantry and everything for them. So it's like global VR on steroids, perhaps. And there you can see it looks like you're controlling a chain gun, and so doing some heavy firepower there, but that's quite the shield along the face. It seems to the viewport seems kind of tiny there. Now here's a new one that is very interesting. And so we found out this is actually developed by 3 Mindwave, which is based out of Hong Kong. And they've done a bunch of games for Sega, but they've also done some for others too. The booth that this was found at is called a company called HY Technologies. And as far as I know, this might be the first time that they've hired somebody like 3 Mindwave to design their stuff. But as you can see, very interesting and different sort of setup where you have this archway portal looking cabinet. Again, the only thing that ruins it is that seam in the center. It's too bad perhaps due to cost, they didn't do like an RGB LED or micro LED screen. That probably would be enormously expensive for something of this size, but handles up to 4 players. Here's a little closer look at the guns, and as well as a speaker for the players there. But very unique looking and original game. And because this is 3 Mindwave, there is a small chance, or maybe a decent chance, that we could see this pop up here in the States and Europe. But I would assume that if we do, it's going to be a fairly pricey game. This one might be, certainly above 20,000. I wouldn't be shocked if this would be one that would end up above 30,000. But hey, can't complain about something original. And looks like some sort of fantasy game, maybe a little bit like Drakens, but without the motion seats and all that. And so cool stuff. Also at HY was something that I was very surprised to see. And now anybody who knows pinball knows that it's considered classic Americana. In fact, the old company Gottlieb used to put on their pinball machines, like back in the 1950s, they would put "Play pinball. It's as American as hot dogs and baseball." And like that was their company motto for a while, as they were really trying to get pinball unbanned from being a gambling device in certain areas. But just pinball has shown up in Asia before. It's just never been very prevalent. And usually when we have seen pinball over there, it's like digital pinball. But this looks to be verifiably like actual mechanical pinball. But it's also being used, as you can see here, to work as the way to play, or like combining it with a merchandiser. Like that's something I've never seen before. I'm very curious how the game plays and whatnot. Let's see, zooming in here. Looking at these flippers, it's hard to tell if that's the exact 3-inch size or if maybe it's a little bit smaller. But also we can see there are some drop targets in the back here. The playfield is definitely a lot more basic than what we usually would find from Stern or Jersey Jack or Spooky or any of the other American manufacturers. But if you're playing a merchandising redemption game, you probably don't want something super complex. Anyways, that's usually why, or that's why redemption's always failed with pinball, in my opinion, is because it's just far too complex. Whereas usually you need something very basic, straightforward, ends your game and almost as soon as it starts, sort of thing, which I guess sometimes that can happen with pinball, right? But yeah, very unique application. But these also apparently are available for just regular play. The translation on tickets is totally wrong there. Also trying to make a play at having these work for ticket redemption. And so again, will that work being a simpler game? Maybe. I mean, here's one design flaw that I can see right here is it's very usually don't put a central target, something that's blocking the path of the pinball, that far down on the playfield. Now, I guess to be fair, this looks like a shortened playfield versus your typical pinball machine, and that you really want to get it into up the ramp into the pop bumpers there for points, and then it can come out here. But I guess just one big wild card is, how have they tested this out to see if the ball gets stuck in certain areas? Because that's one problem with getting pinball right, is that you don't want to force the operator to have to go and remove the glass all the time because the ball's getting stuck somewhere. It always needs to be able to fall down and eventually drain to work correctly. But still, yeah, the first time that I recall in a long time that China's making a real play at pinball, and even with bounds instead of bonus. All right, another company that I think I've heard of once before. I think this was at the GTI Expo last year. This game that at first I thought it was them just calling it Doom because of how stylized this is, and this looks like almost like the more recent Doom games from id Software. But it's Boom, a horse racing sort of game, but like a twin model is a little bit unusual to see, like where they're sharing the same screen as opposed to different screens. I guess I don't know exactly how you'd pronounce this, Jiaxing, perhaps. I don't know Chinese, so there's also this one that has 3 players sharing one screen for Racer Horse or Racer Horse Champion, perhaps. This is another one that's out of order. This was for Wallop, but I don't know if we'll see this here. We might. I have heard there has been confirmation that Konami is really selling stuff here into the States. It just looks like they're not really working with distributors. They may just be working direct with buyers. But this is known as U-Beat here in North America, when it had been released in very limited quantities, but it's known as U-Beat over in Japan and now China, and Wallop is carrying this one. And so it just has this grid of buttons that you push, and it's a music game, but it has a very popular following and such. And actually Konami has been testing out a brand new version over in Japan just very recently, but it uses a wider screen, but it still is maintaining that grid. It looks a little strange to me, but it's early prototype. And this is also another thing from Wallop where they had this tabletop card game and stuff. All right, Leon Amusement, as I had mentioned previously, has something to do with Flamestone, but the only new stuff that I saw at the Leon Amusement booth was this Speedy Ball game, which is doing something. It's taking that concept. Maybe you might have seen a year or two ago, there was the Ice Cold Beer remake from Retro Arcade Remakes, and that was a game that had originally been done in 1982, and just an old mechanical game where you're pushing the rod up and it has a ball in the center and you're trying to keep the ball going around the holes. And so this is that classic concept, but adapted into a video game, and it appears that the game is able to sense exactly where the ball is. My assumption is that you're trying to move the ball to get it through those magenta colored gems or purple colored gems, maybe the yellow ones as well. gold coins, perhaps. It's hard to tell exactly. I guess I should zoom in. Okay, yeah, they're all gems, but that's what it looks like you're trying to do, and you're using something like a steering wheel to move it as opposed to do 2 joysticks. So I guess it'd be interesting to try. It's certainly different. But that was the only thing I saw at Leon. A new company that I don't remember hearing about before called McCrown. It's McCrown. Had this game either Gallop or Iron Horse Showdown, or maybe it's Gallop Iron Horse Showdown. I'm not sure, but kind of funny that they use that terminology for horse racing, and it's not a horse racing game. It's just a motorcycle racer on a platform. Here's something that also is original and also interesting, that it's another pinball thing, but this company called Oculeap created this very unique digital pinball game where you would stand on those pads there. I think it might be better if it was using something a little closer to a DDR pad. So instead of them being separated, you have both of the footholds on the on one platform, but still use your feet to control the flippers and flip a pinball in a game called Ion Strike. What does that say? Core reboot node. So hey, again, something different, kind of cool in my opinion. I like different. I mean, when it's good, of course, but for a company that has been able to establish some good relationships over here, a lot of their games have been released through LAI Games. It's called Playmore. They do a lot of redemption stuff. I didn't see a lot of videos from their booth. I believe they are the ones with Tom and Jerry there, but that would probably be a license limited just into China. But most of the photos we got was of this new gold game, which I think is a pusher. I mean, it almost looks more like a gambling game to me, especially from this aesthetic, from the screens that you see on here. But had people standing around it. I'm just not 100% sure if why you had all these crowds kind of standing around but not playing at it at the same time. But that, again, that's all I saw from Playmore. So if it is more of a gambling game, then I doubt we would see this one from them. They probably had some other coin pushers over there that I didn't get photos of that will find their way over here at some point. SCA Technology, or C Technology, they've done work with Sega before. In fact, I have a game that's rotting in the back that both the monitors on it died. It was a kids racing game that they had, but they've done some other video games such as this one where I don't know what it is, maybe it's called Ling Cage, because that's what it says on the bottom underneath the monitor, but a 4-player gun game of some kind. Also Today's Marksman as opposed to Yesterday's Marksman or Tomorrow's Marksman, and so 2-player, presumably another shooting gallery style game. But then again, a lot of these games that have been doing the shooting gallery style of mixed shooting gallery levels with normal light gun levels where you're fighting bad guys, whether it's monsters or zombies or dinosaurs or something like that, kind of like the Giga Shot that Jet Games USA has. Here's another one that is also kind of out of order. That one's out of order. We've seen Storm Racer 2 before, so I won't spend a lot of time on that, but that was getting a lot of attention at Wallop. Over at a company called Super Win, they used to, they're known as Super Win, or they wanted to be called Super Wings, but that conflicted with a kids show here in North America, and so they've transitioned over to being more Super Win instead. But this is their answer to other motorcycle racing games in the twin style, using the Speed Rider 40X kind of aesthetic, but with 2 screens instead of 1. And there's a photo of their booth, pretty big there, and it's always kind of maybe a little amusing or a little weird when you see some of these companies come over to IAAPA and they have tiny booths, but when over in China when they're at on their home turf, they've got these absolutely enormous booths that dwarf anything that we see at IAAPA outside of maybe like Zamperla ride booths and such. But they also had this new Flash Rider motorcycle racing game. There's a little merchandiser game or redemption game over on the left there, perhaps. Some other gun games, but instead of using the metal, these look like plastic shells for that. a game that was called Mission X, I think. Also, Marksman is that's on the left here. That's available in the United States through Andamiro. But this other one that's at the center there is, I'm not sure. And poor little girl there, she was all tuckered out after a long day of playing, probably. Superwin also is working with Bandai Namco on the Mini World motion game. Now they have this smaller version over here, but as you can see on this placard that mentions specifically the distribution into Europe and US and UK for this particular model, but not this one right here. And but even this bigger model still has 3 players. The game itself is kind of like Minecraft, but with light guns and such. Also, they carry that game that was seen at IAPA at Namco's booth, but it hasn't been seen since, called The Future, which is more of a Halo-ish sci-fi sort of thing. Here's a closer look at the plastic shell rifles, but it looks like they did integrate a little sight into the top there to compete with like Flamestone and such, I would guess. And then another look at some of their racing ones. Instead of the motorcycle, they just changed out the software. The software and the seat for a car racing game of some kind, as well as this one. But yeah, one thing that I try to tell any developers out there working on arcade games is try to have as few black screen transitions as you can, because it looks like the monitors are off. And if you're walking through an arcade and you're just walking kind of quickly through it and the screen is black for 3 or 4 seconds, people might think that the game's off and they keep walking, but there's still a lot of games that do that for some reason. And here's another vertical screen racing game, but not sure what it is other than it says Max on the end. Now over at a company called Techway, they've been very uneven as to what products they show. They usually have kids games. They brought a fighting game, like a one-on-one Street Fighter 4 style fighting game to IAPA many years ago, well over a decade ago, and then they just kind of disappeared from IAPA for a while. But here's something different from a boxing machine. You know, when you look at boxers, they're so ubiquitous. They always have just kind of the same sort of cabinet over and over and over again. But this one, your punching bag, I guess it would probably come out and you punch it there, and it looks like you're actually fighting a dude with rocking in those abs. But that's all we had from Techway. That was worth talking about. Another look at the Thunderjets from Ace. This company called Tongli Animation has a lot of crane machines and such, but they also have this new dinosaur game. It's like I've mentioned before, I've been surprised that with the success of Jurassic Park Arcade that we haven't seen more stuff like this pop up. I mean, we have once in a blue moon, but it's been starting to show up a little bit more. And this has a 3D marquee topper, like that Velociraptor head actually sticks out. It might be a little hard to tell there, but as we zoom in, you can see that that's like a 3D molded thing. And I almost wonder if that actually that looks like a nozzle that I mean, I hope it wouldn't be fire, but maybe like a water spray or something, or dino breath spray. That would be interesting and terrible. But yeah, so a 4-player dinosaur shooting game called Dino Land is there from Tongli. Now here's a company that you may know called Eunice, but again, when they're on their home turf, they tend to have a slightly different focus. There are some games that they don't release overseas just because they probably wouldn't sell, such as this. There's a couple of card-based games that are similar to Minecraft Dungeons Arcade that they have there as we see here. One is called Amazing Universe. The other one, which this is the one that I referred to earlier, that already had over 3,000 sales according to them on LinkedIn. It's over on the far right, right here, and that is Picture Book Land. And again, it's very similar to Minecraft Dungeons Arcade. Graphics aren't quite as good as that one though, and they also have something with the Calabash Brothers, which I'm not familiar with. and some other redemption games. They did a big thing with Cyberpunk 2077, which it was nice of them to unveil that at like Las Vegas, doing that in the States before they did it over in China. But when I was talking with Steve at Eunice, he was telling me that it was just getting massive clicks over in China. And so a lot of interest on this one. So this will probably sell very, very well over there. But I also assume this will do pretty well here too. I enjoyed the game from what I played. And now, if you're curious, it's very common in Chinese trade shows for the companies to hire a small group of dancers who will also work as the what used to be called booth babes. That's become kind of a persona non grata sort of position out in the West as companies move away from that sort of thing. But over in China, they don't care. And so they don't have the same kind of reactions to things like that. But yeah, when they unveil a game or like when the show starts, they'll usually have somebody presenting and talking about the game features, and then they'll have these girls do a choreographed dance. And so that's what's going on here. But closer on the machine, from what we can tell, it doesn't look like they've changed a whole lot to the cabinet. I know Steve was telling me in Vegas that they were going to make some adjustments to the bike and whatnot. If they did, it's hard to tell there, but I wouldn't be surprised if some of those adjustments have been made. Also, Eunice is working with My Little Pony, which as a redemption game, I wouldn't be surprised if that would do pretty well here in the States. Pickleball Rivals, the first pickleball video game to hit the arcade scene, which after Amusement Expo, they announced this single version, I think just due to demand. They had a lot of people wanting to just have a single one that they could link together. You can link up to 4, but the twin model is still available if that's the way you want to go. One game that was supposed to be at IAPA and then it was supposed to be at Amusement Expo, I think it didn't make it due to shipping issues, was this Ski Hero. Now, at prior to this event, they were only showing this portrait style version, but at AAA, they showed off this new version, which uses the widescreen instead. And I mean, maybe it's just the perspective, but it looks like the control panel is slightly larger. I would be really surprised though, but then again, it is different because like even here on the back, you can see that they are different. So as well as the coin box is different. So maybe it is like that, but that's a new arcade exclusive that Eunice has and is available now. We just still haven't seen it over here yet. This one here on the left is Turbo Nova, which they also had at IAPA, but due to freight problems, it was like held up in the port in California. It didn't come to Vegas. Here's the Chinese version of Godzilla Kaiju Wars DX by Raw Thrills, as well as Fast and Furious Arcade and Top Gun. And then finally, we're getting to the end here. I know I'm going very, very long compared to where we usually go. This is Wallop in their booth. This is Asphalt 9 Legends Arcade Plus. And so it uses a cabinet that's similar to Storm Racer 2, but they also have Asphalt Moto Blitz DX Plus over on the left. And so both of those games were carried by LAI Games here in the States. It's unclear at this point if they will do that again for this Plus upgrade, but it's possible. And this is getting a lot of attention. But again, this sold so well in China, makes so much sense for them to offer this as a new cabinet and adds more tracks and things of that nature. Now, another game that we've seen over here is available through Sega, but in a different cabinet style, is Alpha Ops VR Strike, developed by 3 Mindwave. It's really just the cabinet and the guns are different, but the gameplay is all the same. Here where you can see how big of a deal that the NBA superstars and this show was to Wallop. So this, I presume this is everybody who works at Wallop posing for the camera. Also, they have a game called Kingdoms Fantasy, which vends cards, and it's kind of their Minecraft Dungeons arcade, which I wouldn't presume that this will be released here in the States, but it's big stuff over in China, and the cards can even be played as a tabletop game, which I wouldn't mind if something like that existed for Minecraft Dungeons or Injustice or Marvel. Here's a card vending merchandiser, Card Storm. This is a new light gun game shown off by Wallop called Demon Hunter 1892. Has a little bit of a Van Helsing aesthetic to it, but handles up to 4 players. New kids games. If these come over here, they would probably be more redemption focused. Eggy Party, as well as Step Dash. Interestingly enough, Elot has broken into the Chinese market, starting with Smurf or the Smurfs. They're using their coin pusher there. Initial D, the arcade, very big over in Asia, in all parts of Asia. But there are fans of it here in the States, and Round One USA usually has this game, but you can't find it anywhere else. Here's a better look at that Kingdoms Fantasy game. My DX by Sega, also being represented and sold into China through Wallop. And this is the latest software on that. Monster i3, which is carried by LAI Games. Now, they also showed off this Monster i3 Plus, which is like a big theater version. I don't know that LAI will carry this or not. Probably not. But if you had an FEC and you wanted something more of a theater style experience, if you remember the old Galaxian 3 theater, then this is something like that, but with the Monster i3 software, and looks pretty cool, like a miniature ride. Monster i3 Unite, which is known as Kaiju Rampage Unite in through LAI Games. And then NBA Superstars was a big deal. And so one thing that's changed about this for the Chinese release, I'm still waiting on full details from Play Mechanics on this and whether or not they'll release this over here. But for now, it's just in China. But as you can see, this model holding those cards. So this does vend what looks to be packets of cards as opposed to just a single card per play. And it uses readers. And so you put the card on the reader and then it scans your player into the game. I would presume, but I still haven't gotten an answer on this yet, it would come with a packet of 3 cards so you could build your whole team or something along those lines. But again, I don't know for sure just because those details weren't offered. But then here are some of those models. I think there was a bunch of photos with them as well. I think they also did the dance as we talked about earlier. Storm Racer 2, Storm Rider X. Storm Racer 2 and Storm Rider X are both available in North America through Amusement Source International. I also believe Storm Racer 2 is available through Betson. Phantom Vanguard, which is available through LAI Games. And then this company called Zetan or Shitan, I don't know, had this rhythm game called Magic Sound, which is very similar to a Konami game known as Sound Voltex. Yudo Games, they've been to IAPA and they've been to a lot of trade shows. They're pretty big on that circuit. On this photo here on the right hand side, you can see they have something that almost looks like a DOF robotics type ride there, but I didn't see any other photos that were really good of that, so I'm not 100% sure. But one of their big things that they were pushing was this new Chasing Speed, which is their first attempt at a portrait style racing game. Maybe with a Formula One style wheel instead of your typical arcade wheel, as well as Formula One style racing. And I think that pretty much does it. So I'm way overboard here, but that covers a lot, but not everything that was at the AAA Expo in China. Let us know in the comments below what you think of that. If there's any of this that you would love to see, come over here, and we'll see you next time.
Intercard makes cashless easy with award-winning readers, self-serve kiosks, real-time reporting, and flexible guest payment options. From play cards and credit cards to mobile payments and QR codes. Since introducing the industry's first card system in 1989, Intercard has helped operators reduce cash handling, increase guest spending, and run smarter venues. Intercard is the world leader in cashless technology. If you aren't already part of their global family of customers, they hope you'll become one soon. Visit intercardinc.com to learn more. All right. Well, that was a killer rundown by Adam covering everything that we saw at AAA Expo in Guangzhou. from last week. And so anyway, we are taking a week off of Sound Off this week due to Kevin's travels to the AAA Expo. So he got back just a couple of nights ago. And so we were not able to record a Sound Off, but there's going to be lots of, we're going to obviously dig into and discuss from the things and the trends that he saw while at AAA Expo as well. The next time we do a Sound Off. So remember, we've got suggestions for season 5 of the LBX show. So if you have those suggestions, scan this QR code here, submit them. We've already been collecting some suggestions from some of you to, how we can change up and improve on everything we're doing here in the LBX show for season 5, which kicks off August 1st. So anyway, get those suggestions in there. And with that, that is a wrap for this week's LBX show. This is Brandon Wiley signing off. Stay tuned and keep kicking ass.